This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Hello out there and welcome to episode 138 of the Good Neighbor Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sedita. And normally we talk to business owners and charity groups and people that are doing stuff in the community. Today we have a little bit of a treat. We have with us Kate Spurlock. She is the Assistant State's Attorney with the 6th Judicial Circuit. That's easy for me to say. Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being on. If you're not familiar with what the Good Neighbor Podcast is, essentially in 2020, the Good Neighbor Podcast started as a way for business owners and groups in the community to get their message out to the residents in the area and the surrounding areas. And over the last 4 years, it has evolved into a national brand. We have Good Neighbor Podcasts in Denver, Atlanta, Virginia, all over. I'm the person here in Tampa who gets to do this and talk to folks like you. And part of the reason I'm glad we connected is with what you do, it plays very well into what some of my philanthropic groups in the community do. So this isn't truly a traditional business podcast, but let's get everybody up to speed with what do you do at the 6th Judicial Circuit in the state's attorney's office?
Perfect. So I am I'm an assistant state attorney, which means that I work under the elected official, which is Bruce Bartlett, the state attorney. I work in the special victims unit. So in that unit, we handle cases ranging from homicide involving children as victims, aggravated child abuse, which is injuries of great bodily harm or more, and any child sex case with a victim under the age of 12, human trafficking, and online exploitation of children. So child pornography and things like that.
So this is a little bit of a heavy topic to have, on this podcast. This isn't like an entertainment podcast. This is really an educational podcast. The question I have for you is, look, I watch SVU. I mean, I know that's a dramatization of it. You're seeing and hearing, real world files and hearing real world information. When you were growing up, I mean, look, it's one thing to be an attorney that's a PI attorney that's, I don't want to use the term ambulance chaser, but I will say, you're not running and following people who are getting hurt in a car accident. You're doing very heavy duty, serious subject matter. How do you prepare yourself? In law, were you going to law school and I want to go into this, or did something kind of guide you to this calling of doing this?
It's a little bit of both. I do feel that it is a calling that, I've just had that placed on my heart. The Lord's just kind of guided me that way. But in my professional career, I knew I wanted to go to law school to be an assistant state attorney. But when I got to law school, that's where I kind of honed in on these types of cases. I interned in the Jacksonville State Attorney's Office, handling the Special Victims Unit and Jimmy Rice. I forgot to mention, but I also do the civil commitment of sexually violent predators. So if you were sentenced to prison and as you're being released, you are still considered a danger to reoffend, I do a civil commitment and I petition the court to hold indefinitely until they're no longer a danger. So
okay, so time out before you continue on to what you were saying. So essentially that role is someone getting back into society from prison with one of these offenses. You're basically the civil part of it is you are getting them into the sex offender program where they're monitored. Is that what we're talking about?
So when you plead to a certain charge, it either qualifies you to be a sexual predator or it qualifies you to be a sexual offender. Sexual predators have a higher designation, more egregious crimes.
Okay.
When you're a sexual predator, you have to also have another mental health. So some of them are true psychopaths, sociopaths, as well as having pedophilia. And when those two things combine, they have a very high recidivism rate, so they're likely to reoffend. And it was actually started out of a case in Miami where a gentleman actually released from prison, raped and abducted a young boy out of Miami. And that's the Jimmy Rice Act. And the little boy's name was Jimmy Rice. And so we do these hearings, and it's really doctors who testify about the risk and whether they're ready to be released. And so we do a commitment trial, and then every year, if they're committed, they're up for a reevaluation of whether their condition has such changed to be released.
Okay, so two questions I have off of that.
Sure.
What is the line and again, this is heavy material, but if someone is watching and again, I'm totally a novice. I have no idea. I'm going just from, SVU episodes. But if someone's a sexual offender, is that someone who maybe watches child porn, and a predator is someone who has that other mental illness and has taken it to the next level? Is that the line designation?
So it's mostly statutorily. If it's a first-degree felony or greater, so a mandatory life sentence, it requires a sexual predator designation, with the exception of human trafficking is the only one that is a life felony, but is only a sex offender.
Wow, okay.
Everything else is a sexual predator. If it's a second-degree felony or less, that second to third, those are lesser. Those are sex offenders.
Okay, so it's based on the statute.
Yes.
And then the next question I have is, when people are coming back into, out of prison for their offense, is there statistics? That's easy for me to say. Are there statistics on the rate where people go back to offending? Like, do we have numbers on if someone gets out, or is it like 100 people get released for this offense? Do 80% of them have a return offense?
So we do have some statistical numbers. The Jimmy Rice Act's been in effect since 1999 and really started in 2000. So we have really now 24 years of data.
Okay.
Those predators, they use some actuarial tools called the Stable 2007 and the Static 99R that are very certain big factors create a point system. And at the end, it tells them on a scale, are they high risk, medium risk, or low risk, is kind of a real quick summation of it.
Okay.
And that's based on statistical data of other, like out of 100 sex offenders, how many within those are likely to reoffend.
Okay, so the next question I have based on what you just said is, if they're high, medium, and low potential, when they come to your desk, is there a different level of your oversight with them depending on the level that they come in at?
So to be qualifying for Jimmy Rice is not every sex offender that gets released from prison. So if you end up at my desk because a doctor already thinks that you are a danger, the state attorney's office will file a petition and proceed to Jimmy Rice to hold you civilly. Because honestly, out of 100, we're maybe getting like 10. So what we're dealing with are the worst of the worst. They have multiple victims over a span of years. So they might have 4, 5, 6 different victims. They might be using bondage or violence, things of that nature that make them more dangerous than someone that might have been a crime of opportunity.
So, more questions off of that. So if they're doing that, since the Jimmy Rice law went into effect in 2000, are people getting convicted? Like, how are they getting out if they've had multiple victims? Like, I don't see, is it just like certain pleas and stuff that gets them out early, that they're going to be back into the general, into the population, into the world?
That's a great question. So my general feeling is that I think that over time, the Jimmy Rice Act will be less and less necessary. But when it started, you have to look at back in the 80s and 90s, people were getting 15, 20 years on a sex case, but they only had to serve 35% of their sentence. So you're really serving a minimal amount of time. So these people were getting out while they were still really young. So, okay, you commit a crime at 25 years old, but you only really served like 6 years. So you're really only 31, right?
Right.
And you're still in the prime of your sex drive and things of that nature. So we were having this danger where people were reoffending. My job, because I deal with the worst of the worst, other people in my office do child sex cases, but I typically do the more complex, really young victims, really egregious cases. We're pretty tough on the sentence on the front end. And we take into consideration how old are you when you're getting out. So I think that times have changed. When I handled a case in Jacksonville, that was a Jimmy Rice case. The guy he had stabbed a woman 26 times, slit her throat, raped her, and he had attempted first-degree murder and sexual battery, and he only served like 12 years. So whereas today, an attempted first-degree murder is a life sentence, right? You can get life for that. So the punishments over time have gotten more, and we don't have parole anymore. And even if you're the best inmate, you have to serve 85% of your sentence. And if you are convicted of a sexual battery or any lewd or lascivious case under those statutes, you're not entitled to good and gain time. So you serve the full balance.
So that's exactly what I was getting at. So now that these new laws are in place, it's stricter rules. These people aren't getting out as if they're that egregious. They're just not getting out where you're having to monitor this. So there's a less and less caseload under Jimmy Rice that you're dealing with.
Yes, I mean, what I'm dealing with are people from the 90s and the 2000s, kind of.
Gotcha. So
I'm not dealing with someone that just resolved a case 2 years ago.
Because they're just not coming back.
Typically, I mean, if sex with a child under the age of 12 is a mandatory life sentence, the court has to give life. And in Florida, there's no parole. Life is life. It's as long as you
Okay, so if you're fooling around with a child under 12, you're disgusting, and you're never coming back, and the time you're spending in your life is pretty miserable wherever you go, because that's the worst of the worst when you're incarcerated. So here's the question I have listening to some of this. Well, actually, I'll save that in a minute. But so tell me, in your role now, I mean, we talked about this. You live in the Pasco County area. You work out of a Pinellas County office. You're seeing cases with the 6th Judicial Circuit from Pasco and Pinellas County. How many cases are you seeing? I mean, do you measure it in years? Do you measure it in months? Like, how are you tracking? How many are you usually seeing come across your desk?
Okay, so currently I have about a 70 cases caseload. I'm one of 3 people in this unit, so we're each carrying around 50 to 70 cases. And we're busy. I think the pandemic has only exploded a lot of this, where people were kept out of school. Child pornography has obviously exponentially grown over time of access to the internet, and human trafficking has grown exponentially.
So wait, so are you saying and this is your opinion? I mean, we're saying this is your opinion. I mean, you could give me data if you have it, but due to COVID and people being locked up, do you think it's a combination of people that are sick are sicker because they're kind of confined through that period, and B, children that were kept out of social interaction are more likely to be susceptible to some interaction with somebody? Is that the combination? Is that the Bermuda Triangle of all this?
I think there's a real correlation with children that are removed and isolated. It's less likely they're going to tell someone. It usually takes some time. We get a lot of cases, and I have family members that homeschool, so I'm not knocking that, but that can be a real pervasive, where kids aren't accessed by teachers and other people. They don't learn good touches and bad touches. I actually recently just handled a case of a girl who was kept home under homeschooling in the 2nd grade. She never received a formal education, and her father actually fathered a child with her. And so her daughter could have been her sister. And she was in her 20s by the time she came forward, and she didn't really understand that any of that was a crime or wrong, because she had no social parameters to understand that that's wrong. She was isolated completely.
And I'm assuming like 90, well, I don't know, I'm going to throw out a percentage. It's probably way wrong, but my novice understanding is 90% of these cases, not the human trafficking stuff, but the 90% of these cases is a family member, no? Or is the number lower than that?
So it's kind of twofold. If you're dealing with hands-on offending of sexual battery or molestation, that is probably 80% or higher someone known to the victim. They're a close family friend, they're an uncle, they're a grandfather, they're a mom's boyfriend. I do have one female sex offender case, so that's rare, but predominantly it is men. And then when you deal with the online exploitation, it's almost exclusively strangers.
Strangers, yeah.
So when you're dealing with sextortion, child pornography, like seduction of a child over the internet, those kind of cases that we do, or human trafficking, those are stranger kind of interactions.
So, and that's the thing I wanted to transition into next is, so as a member of the Weston Chapel Rotary, as we've talked about, we're building a home for victims of human trafficking. After they survive this ordeal, they're building a campus, Bridging Freedom, the Rotary Club, we're helping them with that. Our entire district, 6950, has people, Rotary clubs from all over our district are donating to this because the cause is so rampant. I mean, you're talking about 150 to 210 cases currently, based on the numbers you just gave me, of active cases going on right now. So Pasco County has a real epidemic for this. This is how we got involved with it. one of the most disturbing things, and I want to put this out there so parents can hear this, which I found the most disturbing, is that the entry point for predators for trafficking. And that is usually like there's apps and games and ways that they can speak to and kind of catfish susceptible children into a relationship to almost lure them to a spot where they think they're safe, but they're not. They think they're talking to another preteen, whatever it is. And that's how the connection and a lot of that abduction happens, correct?
Sure, absolutely. I actually had a case myself in Clearwater here where two girls were at high school. The guy messaged them, and one girl was actually living in a homeless shelter, and he offered to let her earn money. And so her and her friend left school and were taken to an Airbnb, and the most horrific acts were filmed. And the more that they did, the more he would pay them to do. And when we actually searched his device, his GoPro, we found a myriad of other unknown young females all across the country. So what he was doing this horrific fetish, graphic bondage type sex acts. And he was, I believe, selling them or uploading them to the internet, to the dark web, creating, a business, really.
Revenue
and
stream.
These poor girls are left in the aftermath and with horrific things happening to them in their videos. Like, these girls got lucky that we caught it the same day before he had time to upload their videos. Otherwise, those live in infant. They can never be.
Right, can't be undone. It cannot be
Correct.
undone. So one of the things you mentioned a minute ago, hands-on cases versus trafficking and all that stuff. The girl you mentioned who fathered the child, etc. What is the statute of limitations? I mean, murder, there's no statute of limitations, right? So how far out can someone, they realize that this is illegal, how far out can they be prosecuted?
So if it is a crime, so we call it capital sexual battery. That is sex with a child under the age of 12. And so it could be oral or other areas. That has no statute of limitations. So we have had cases, and I have prosecuted cases sometimes 10 years or more later. They're difficult to try, but if the victim's credible, and, I had one where she reported it when she was 8 years old, and DCF failed to forward that on to law enforcement. And she lived in that. And as she got older, she didn't even realize it was still something that could be prosecuted. And the person was living with another woman who had two small young kids, and she was concerned, two young girls. And we actually tried that case. He was convicted and received 3 life sentences on that. It took a time. I mean, she was 19 years old by the time she actually came to our office and reported it, and we were able to do something. But we definitely are willing and open to doing that even after time has passed.
Okay. And just on that particular case, and you may not be able to say this or not, but I hope that girl sued the hell out of the government agency because that is ridiculous. If someone's reporting that, how does that get, are they just so overworked that they're like, she's probably just kidding? I mean, what happens in that case?
They have a requirement to notify law enforcement, and for whatever reason, the officer never did. But when she reported it a second time, he basically conveyed, I've already sent that over to law enforcement. They already know about it. And that never happened. And we only uncovered that, honestly, almost 12 years later when we dig through the records and we realized it never actually went. Those DCF workers were very willing to come testify and to own that they had made a huge mistake. And it is a tough job, and they are overworked. I don't want to minimize that. I
get that. I get it. But this isn't my teacher smacked my hand, or that's not what that is. I mean, that's
correct.
I don't know. That stuff blows my mind, some of that stuff. So let me ask you this question. What do parents need to look out for? Like, are there certain apps that are prevalent? Because it's changing all the time. The technology really makes it easier for these predators to get their hands on these kids. What should parents be looking for? Is there certain technology? Is there certain behavior that they should see in their kids that they can go, that might be a red flag? So I really speak to kind of two things. Like I would say the biggest demographic for our human trafficking are our foster care kids. Kids that are in and out of group homes, foster care,
adoption before they get adopted. Sometimes they bounce around from house to house. It's really unstable. And group homes and we get runaways. I tried a case many years ago of 2 girls that ran away from foster care from a group home. And, they were missing for a month and no one knew it. They weren't on your nightly news. You didn't have an Amber Alert.
Right.
Law enforcement gets a bolo, and instead they were actually being prostituted out of a motel in St. Pete, and by one of the girls' distant aunt. And she had them believing like you have to earn money, right? These were 14-year-old girls.
This is what you do. How you make a living.
The worker from the motel to come forward and say that something's not right. I see a lot of men in and out of this room. I see these young girls, like something's off. That's typically the demographic. I'm not saying it can't happen, but they're more vulnerable to the allure of having something better, having someone that will spend money on them, that care about them.
Right.
If they don't have that parental guidance or familial like affection or guidance. Or we see people who have low IQs or are cognitively impaired, and they're really manipulated into thinking this is like how you work and earn money. I had a girl who had a really low IQ. She operated like a 4th grade education, but she was 25. And so they convinced her that that's how she had to earn money. My other demographic is the online exploitation. So we have a lot of cases of sextortion, seduction of kids over the internet, people soliciting kids for sex. And that happens a lot on these apps. Just normal kids out on the internet. And we see it on Facebook, Instagram, Kik, Discord. All of those are big hubs for this type of stuff. And
so when you say sextortion, it's someone talking to them, getting them to send a picture or something, and then they say to them, if you don't do what I want next, we're going to air this? Is that kind of the blackmail type of, is that the thing?
Yes, I had a girl in Pinellas, and she thought she was dating a boy in the local area. And, I'll send a nude to you. You send one to me. He sends one. It's a fake person.
Right.
She sends one back, and then it immediately flips to, I know where you live. I know what school you go to. I know you do cheering on Tuesdays. And if you don't send more, I'm going to put it on your church. I'm going to put all these pictures at your school. I'm going to tell everybody. And these kids feel
embarrassed
from under it.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to make it end. And so they end up complying more and more. And so it turned out the guy actually had a family. He was in his 30s in right outside Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And he didn't even live in this area. And I do free talks to parents to educate them about this. But our phones have a lot of metadata and photos and images, and people who are savvy know how. So like you always upload your picture with your friends after school on Tuesdays, and it's outside. It's at your cheer practice.
It's geo-targeted. Yeah.
The geolocation of that photo. And so they know, every Tuesday she goes to the cheer thing, or she takes the pictures here at this church, or she lives at this address, because the geolocation's the same. So you're giving out all this data, and there are ways to limit that so that you're not giving it.
So would you say like stuff like that guy, he's not doing it, he's doing it for his own deviation, his own sexual deviation. He's not selling it and replicating it. Are most of the people like that just, they know how to manipulate this data, the metadata, and they want to get it for their own use because they caught a glimpse of this girl's Facebook page somehow and thought she was cute, and they take advantage of it? Or are most of them generally doing it for a financial, is like the financial gain of it?
I think a lot of it's for people's own self-satisfaction.
Satisfaction, yeah.
I'm sure there are some people that sell it. When things like this get uploaded and sold, there are ways in which NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, is an auto regulator to notify law enforcement of child pornography online. So we typically know when someone's uploading or transmitting child pornography or anything related to that, because it automatically, all your service providers have a mandatory requirement to refer it to NCMEC. But if you just send it to me and I just save it and I never do anything with it, the chances maybe are less. And so I think people do it for their own, the thrill of it, the self-satisfaction of it. And I think they think they can get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing. The technology gets them the in, but the technology is also the thing that can catch them because there's these safeguards in place. There's a few things you said here. Like, if you're watching this and not just listening to it, I mean, Kate, you look fairly young to me. My mom always told me never ask a woman when she's due or what her age is. So I'm not asking you, what your age is, but how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it over about 8.5 years. So yes. And then obviously 3 years of law school. So I interned as well in law school doing this.
So my question to you is, I have so many questions, but how do you compartmentalize, you personally, mentally, how do you compartmentalize some of the insane things that you see in your 50 to 70 active cases? There has to be some mechanism that lets you compartmentalize it, or else I would think it would be eating you alive every day. Like, how do you do that?
I think you have to have good coping skills. Some people in my office will say, I can never do your job. I can never deal with this. For me, I think because I'm very victim centered. So I'm willing to wade through the darkness and the muck to help these kids. Like, it is so rewarding to be a shining light to some of these kids in a really dark, vulnerable moment. They're kind of at a crossroads. Like, are they going to
worst moments of their life?
Are they going to be a victim forever? Or I mean, my biggest thing I say to all of my kids is, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to prosecute the case or handle the cases however is needed. But if you're not okay at the end of this, what are we doing? Right? Like, I want them to end up being contributing members who rise. And, life does hit some of us really hard, right? With really difficult things, but
right.
It's all in how we respond. And I think encouraging them, that to me is the driving motivator. I'm a mom, and so I care to see these kids succeed. And some have used me as a reference for a job or asked me to write a letter of recommendation. Like, I'm in their corner. I mean, I have a job to do, but I also really want to see them go to the counseling, go to the therapy, and move forward. And for me, I think the healthy thing is when I'm here, I do this job well. And then when I come home, I try to be a mom. And some days are tough. I mean, I also deal with homicides of kids. Those days are tough, right? Like, seeing an autopsy of a child that's been beaten to death is horrific. And you go home and you hug your kid just a little bit tighter that day. But what we do is so important that you can't get caught in the emotion of it and lose sight of the good that we're doing.
So how many kids do you have and how old are they?
I have one child, a son. He's 3.5.
Okay, so he's little. He's a baby. I know. Yep. Are you married? I mean,
I am.
So what does your significant other do, work like this? I mean, or please tell me he or she is a painter or a cake baker or something that doesn't have anything heavy that goes on.
He's actually an engineer and he works on at the Tampa International Airport. So he's math guy. And he's a great support in all of this. And I think having someone that understands, because some weeks I'm unavailable a lot, right? He really picks up the slack for me so that I can give the 110% to that case and see it through.
So I want to take a little bit of it. I mean, we've already been talking for almost 30 minutes, so it's gotten a little bit longer, but I wanted to just take a quick, personal diversion here. So do you like watching horror movies? Do you like gory, bloody guts horror movies?
I don't hate them, but I don't typically.
So you do. That's the person. That's okay. So you like that a little bit.
I do like a little bit of light things in my personal life because I mean, there's not much that can shock me or horror.
Well, and that's what I'm asking. The desensitization of what you see. Nothing can possibly gross you out and bother you. I would think. A movie like Gone Baby Gone, or you know that movie with Casey Affleck, something like that is just disturbing. But when you watch the news, when you see something like Jeffrey Epstein case, do you watch that? I mean, obviously you don't. The way I watch it, my eye looking at it versus your eye looking at it, you have a completely different perspective. I get that, but do you look at some of that and go how did this go on? So how does something like that affect you personally when you look at that?
It doesn't shock me because I see those cases and I have that. They just don't have a high profile name. But these kids, I mean, who would imagine that a girl had been held captive since the 2nd grade in St. Pete, right? In a metropolitan metro area. in a
Right.
trailer with no running water for years, and an 8-year-old that had never been to school. She gave birth to that child at the hospital, and nobody asked questions about who the father was and what was happening. And she went back into captivity and never had any life exposure. So I see her at 25 and she's struggling to understand, like, her daughter came home and said, I had a school project. She didn't know what that was. She doesn't have a concept of that.
Right.
So it's really hard to shock me because I have seen shocking things. So no, I don't watch the news and get shocked. Sometimes, to be fair, I don't watch the news a lot because otherwise I feel like the whole world's bad, and I know there's a lot of good too. So I deal with a lot of heavy stuff, but when I am in my personal life, I try not to like take on other things that are not for me to take on.
Yeah. It's like I'm just thinking in my head of like Gone Baby Gone is one movie. If people haven't seen that, it's disturbing and good. But like a movie like Spotlight, like, you familiar with Spotlight with Liev Schreiber, like that movie about the Boston priests and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Like that stuff, that's real. Like that whole interaction is just disturbing. But then I think about all the shows on like Discovery, ID, and all this other stuff. Like, if I had your job, I watch them and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe people are like this. But in your real world, you're dealing with that. I would be watching like Coco Melon would be like, I'm sure you're going to watch a lot of Coco Melon actually. But like, I would need that to like counterbalance it mentally for me. I'm assuming you have to have some of that.
I do. I don't like self-inflict the pain
in
my personal life. I'm not saying we won't watch a thriller movie or stuff, but I don't really watch legal dramas just because they're not usually accurate. So it's a tough road, but I also do general homicide. So, I deal with I don't have the reaction, I guess. And I used to do traffic homicide. So any traffic fatalities, DUI manslaughters, I would go to the scene and work those.
Yeah, it's gross.
So you see a lot, and it's, you have to have a healthy detachment and a healthy, it's like doctors who see heavy stuff and death. They have to have a healthy coping and separation to that.
Okay, so your son is a little over 3 years old. Your husband is an engineer. What do you guys do for fun? Are you guys into the beach? Do you like to go biking and hiking? What do you do to unplug and mentally check out and get away and spend time with the family? Do you like to go to concerts? What do you do?
We do. Honestly, we love our community. So we're usually at different markets. We're at the, Starkey Market on the weekend, or we're, at the hub. We're at different, I like to just spend quality time. Usually, like last night I was here till really late working on several cases because I've got, probably 20 trials set up until June. So, some nights are late. So when I'm there, I want to be full present, spending time with my family, spending time with my son. And we just love to be outside and we go to church and we're normal.
What do you do at Starkey Market? All I do there is drink coffee and pay for snacks.
Yes, sometimes it's a nice release, and he can run around a little bit. It's a great outdoor space.
So, I guess the big question I have as we sort of wrap this up is, what do people need to look out for and know? Like, what if there's something going on? I would think the first thing is just go to your local law enforcement and say, you see something, say something, that type of thing. But like, what should parents really be looking out for? Is there behavioral stuff? Is there any of that stuff that people can take away from this and feel like I'm armed with a little ammunition to be able to, you try to slow it down or try to make sure my kids know to talk to me, or like what services are out there for them if their kids they think have been marginalized besides going to law enforcement? If they think something's going on, is there support groups or anything like that available?
Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of first prevention. So in my family, I have a 3.5-year-old son. We still talk about, even at a young age, what's appropriate, what's not. You need to talk to your kids about good touches and bad touches, right? That should be an obvious thing so that kids know healthy boundaries and they know to come to you when someone violates that boundary. And when it comes to online, I'm a big proponent of, when you're dealing with elementary school kids, there should be a ton of oversight as to what you're giving them access to. You shouldn't be giving them apps that you've never downloaded and looked through yourself. You should not be setting parental controls. And, you have to build this trust where obviously when they're 16, 17, maybe it's less oversight, but it's a continual conversation. I think you need to educate your kids. Like, what you put out there, you may never be able to get back. And also, I'm a huge proponent of not letting your kids' devices charge in their bedrooms. It's an easy way to prevent a lot of this because things happen after dark that just don't happen in the daytime. Conversations, text messages, apps. I mean, we see it. I just invested a case on Thursday, and the guy, when we downloaded his phone, is having chats with all these people soliciting 11-year-olds to have sex with him.
Right.
He's 38 years old and soliciting an 11-year-old, and it's on Instagram. So you think, and it starts with, "You're so pretty, you're so mature." There's the same lingo. So checking their stuff. There's also apps you can put on devices that will let you know when something's being said or maybe inappropriate and alerts a parent. There's Bark is one of them. There's like Mama Bear. And if you feel that your child is different, they're acting different, they're withdrawn, they don't like the things they used to like, that means something. You need to, if they're not going to open up to you, maybe find a counselor or someone. And there are services that offer free counseling. You know, if you have a hard time, I'll give my email in the end. Reach out to me. I will connect you with someone that can help. But I think that giving a child a safe outlet to maybe discuss if something's been inappropriate, maybe they don't tell their parent, but they tell a friend or they tell a teacher or they'll tell a counselor or a therapist. But you know your kid, and when they're just off or they really don't want to spend time with that cousin anymore and it's just uncomfortable, they keep avoiding. That may mean something. Don't jump to everything, but be intuitive and also keep an open dialogue. You know, if you never discuss it, your kid's probably never going to feel comfortable coming to you about it.
You know, it's funny. I mean, I'm a bit older than you are, but like when we were kids, it was stranger danger. It was, you know, don't talk to strangers. I mean, those rules still apply. Strangers could just get in without pulling up at a van anymore. You can get in through your phone, through the thing that you're using. So I think the biggest thing, if you're listening to this or watching it, parents, you know, have a central location in the house where everybody charges their phone, where the kids are leaving their phone so they don't have access to it in the middle of the night. Look up apps like, would you say Bart and Mama Bear are two of them, right?
That you can download and we'll run in the background and alert you to
so this way you can at least monitor what's going on a little bit, especially when the kids are in that elementary school age. It's super important. Look through the apps that they're using, but even the most common stuff that's out there, Facebook, Instagram, there's still predators trying to get in and come after your kids. So it is vital to have that oversight when you're dealing with them. And then, you know, I just think the biggest thing is if you're seeing a change in your child, like Kate said, if they no longer want to go to so-and-so's house abruptly or something's going on there, have the conversation. The communication is vital, and making them feel like it's safe to communicate, that they're not going to get punished for saying what's going on. Because the longer it goes, I mean, I'm sure you see, the longer it goes on, it's harder for them the shame and the guilt and all that stuff kind of piles up and the cases get bigger and bigger.
It's usually a lot of manipulation. If you say this, you're going to break up the family. You're going to get me in trouble.
Right.
You're going to be in trouble.
It's our secret.
So kids feel a lot of guilt. Like, I want to say something, but I also don't want to ruin my mom's life. I don't want us to keeping that dialogue that like, hey, what adults deal with is not your problem, right? You as a kid come to me and I'll deal with whatever that is. That's a dialogue we keep in our house. Like, certain things are adult problems and they're never kid problems. But I do offer free talks. So if anyone who's listening wants to host a parent night at their house, or they want to do a thing at their church or at school, I do my best to try and educate parents of like application and real life examples of how to keep your kids safe online. Like you said, the guy in the van, he's on your kid's Xbox, he's on Roblox. He's the predator lives in your social media, and when you put your kids online, you are turning them over. Whether they end up a victim or not, they're interacting with them. That is where they live. That's where all of our cases are. On Xboxes and Roblox and all those different things are all vessels for people to identify and get to kids.
The horror movie when I was a kid is the stranger is in the house. Every time you bring a cell phone in, the stranger is in the house with you and your kids. So folks, if you're listening to this, okay, you can reach out to Kate. Her email is Catherine Spurlock. That's Kathryn Spurlock, SPURLOCK @FL as in Florida, SA as in State's Attorney 6.gov. Kate, thank you for the work you do. It's phenomenal. I get to see it through my efforts with the Rotary Club. Hearing it from your end, I would love to talk more with you offline to see parents, if you're looking to bring someone in to educate a group, a church, contact Kate. She does a great job. She's a member of our community. Thank you so much for being on the Good Neighbor podcast with us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Passcode. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasco.com. That's gnppasco.com or call 813-922-3610.